What happens when destiny chooses the weakest to become the most powerful? For Sarah Ashwood, life had always meant silence. Silence when the higher ranks spoke. Silence when they pushed past her in the halls. Silence when her own parents looked through her as if she were glass. She was Omega, the lowest designation a wolf could bear. And in the Crescent Ridge Pack, that meant she was nothing. Less than nothing. A shadow that cleaned their halls, prepared their meals, and disappeared before anyone had to acknowledge her existence. But when Alpha Cade Thornridge stood before the entire pack under the harvest moon and rejected her as his fated mate, severing their bond with brutal finality, everything changed. And what happens next? No one was prepared for. Not the pack that cast her out into a winter storm to die. Not the ancient guardians who had been searching centuries for her arrival, and certainly not the prophecy that had been whispered in darkness for 1,000 years, waiting for the moment when an Omega's blood would bring kings to their knees. The harvest moon ceremony always brought the pack together in the great clearing, where torches blazed against the October darkness and the scent of roasted meat and mulled wine hung thick in the air. Sarah stood at the very edge of the gathering, as always, her slight frame wrapped in a thin shawl that did little against the creeping cold. Around her, wolves laughed and celebrated, their voices carrying the easy confidence of those who belonged. She didn't belong. She never had. The hierarchy of werewolves was ancient and absolute. Alphas ruled with strength and dominance, their authority unquestioned. Betas formed the backbone of the pack, warriors, advisors, craftsmen. And Omegas served. They cleaned. They submitted. They existed at the mercy of those above them. Sarah's wolf had never even surfaced. At 22 years old, most wolves had shifted by 16, but her inner wolf remained dormant, silent, a hollow absence that marked her as defective even among Omegas. Her parents, both Betas, barely spoke to her anymore. The disappointment in their eyes had long since hardened into indifference. The scent of lavender and morning dew that clung to her skin, her own scent signature, seemed almost mocking in its gentleness. Alphas carried sense of power, smoke and steel and storm. Even Betas bore earth and leather and strength. But she smelled of wildflowers, delicate and forgettable. "Brothers and sisters!" Alpha Cade's voice boomed across the clearing, and instant silence fell. He stood on the ceremonial platform, massive and commanding, his dark hair gleaming in the torchlight. The scent of forest, embers, ozone, and steel rolled off him in waves, the unmistakable signature of a dominant alpha. Tonight, under the harvest moon, we celebrate our strength, our unity, our future. Sarah's heart clenched. She'd felt it 3 days ago, the bond snapping into place like a golden thread pulled taut between them. The mate bond, ancient, unbreakable. Or so she'd thought. She hadn't told anyone. Who would believe that an alpha like Cade Thornridge had been fated to an Omega like her? It was impossible, absurd. And yet she felt it with every breath, that invisible tether drawing her toward him, singing in her blood. Cade's ice-blue eyes swept the crowd, and for one heart-stopping moment, they locked onto hers. Recognition flared in their depths. He felt it too. The bond thrummed between them, undeniable. Time stopped. Then his lip curled in disgust. "I have an announcement," Cade said, his voice carrying to every corner of the clearing. "As you know, the moon goddess blesses us with fated mates, bonds meant to strengthen our packs and continue our bloodlines." He paused, and the scent of ozone sharpened, crackling with barely contained power. But sometimes, the goddess tests us. She shows us what we must have the strength to refuse. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah's hands began to shake. 3 nights ago, I felt the mate bond form. Cade's eyes found hers again, cold and merciless. With her, 100 faces turned towards Sarah. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her legs had turned to stone. Sarah Ashwood, Cade announced, her name like poison on his tongue. An omega, wolfless, weak. He descended the platform steps with deliberate slowness, each footfall echoing in the sudden silence. The bond may have formed, but I am alpha of this pack. I will not dilute our bloodline. I will not chain myself to weakness. He stopped 3 paces from her, towering over her trembling form. Up close, his scent was overwhelming. Forest and embers, and the sharp bite of ozone before a lightning strike. The bond screamed at her to step closer, to touch him, to complete what destiny had started. I, Cade Thornridge, alpha of the Crescent Ridge Pack, reject you, Sarah Ashwood, as my fated mate. His voice rang with formal authority. I sever this bond before the pack and the moon goddess. You are nothing to me. The pain was instantaneous and absolute. It felt like her chest had been ripped open, her heart torn from her ribs. The golden thread between them didn't just break. It shattered into 1,000 burning fragments that scorched through her veins. Sarah screamed, the sound raw and broken, as she collapsed to her knees in the dirt. Around her, the pack watched in silence, some with pity, most with cold indifference. The scent of her fear, sharp and acrid, mixed with the lavender and dew until she could taste it. Get her out of here, Cade said flatly, already turning away. She's upsetting the celebration. 2 guards grabbed her arms, hauling her upright even as her legs refused to support her weight. Through the haze of agony, Sarah saw her parents in the crowd. Her mother's face was carefully blank. Her father looked relieved. Neither moved to help her. "Wait!" she gasped, the word barely audible. "Please!" "The Alpha has spoken," one guard growled. "You're no longer welcome in Crescent Ridge territory." But it's October. The winter storms. Panic cut through the pain. I'll die out there. The guard's expression didn't change. Should have been born stronger. They dragged her through the crowd, past familiar faces that wouldn't meet her eyes, past the home she'd known her entire life, past the boundaries marked with stone cairns that designated pack territory. When they reached the tree line, they released her so suddenly she fell, her palms scraping against frozen ground. "If you set foot in our territory again," the second guard said, "you'll be killed as a rogue. Those are the Alpha's orders." Then they were gone, melting back into the darkness, and Sarah was alone. The forest at night was a different world. Without a wolf's enhanced senses, Sarah stumbled through underbrush in near-total darkness, her human eyes useless beneath the thick canopy. The temperature had already dropped below freezing, and her thin shawl provided almost no protection against the wind that cut through the trees like knives. She walked because stopping meant dying. Simple as that. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. She couldn't tell anymore. Her feet had gone numb, her fingers too. The pain in her chest from the severed bond had settled into a dull, constant ache that made every breath feel like swallowing glass. When the snow began to fall, soft and silent, Sarah almost laughed. Of course. Of course, the first major storm of the season would come tonight. Within an hour, the soft flakes had become a blizzard. Wind howled through the trees, driving snow into her face until she couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. She wrapped her arms around herself and kept moving, because stopping meant freezing, and freezing meant death, and some stubborn part of her refused to give Cade the satisfaction. She didn't see the ravine until she was falling. The impact drove the air from her lungs. Pain exploded along her ribs, her shoulder, her hip. She lay at the bottom of the slope in a crumpled heap, snow already beginning to cover her, and for a long moment, she simply couldn't move. This is it, she thought distantly. This is how I die, alone in the dark, cast out and forgotten. Her eyes drifted closed. The cold stopped hurting after a while. Her body went numb, the pain fading into something almost peaceful. Consciousness slipped away in stages, the howling wind becoming distant, the biting cold becoming warmth, the darkness becoming deeper still. Somewhere in that darkness, she dreamed of golden eyes and massive shapes moving through shadows. She dreamed of warmth returning, of fur pressed against her frozen skin, of a deep voice rumbling words she couldn't quite hear. "We found her. Is she alive? Barely. Bring her to the den. Now." The dreams shifted. She was moving, carried by something impossibly gentle despite its size. Heat surrounded her, seeping into her frozen limbs with a pins and needles burn that should have hurt, but felt like salvation. When Sarah's eyes finally opened, she thought she was still dreaming. She lay in a massive cave, its walls smoothed by centuries of use, a fire crackling in a stone hearth that filled the space with dancing light and warmth. Furs covered her, thick, luxurious pelts that must have come from animals far larger than any deer or bear she'd ever seen. And surrounding her, arranged in a protective circle, were 10 of the largest wolves she'd ever seen. Sarah froze, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. These weren't normal wolves. Each one was easily the size of a small horse, their shoulders reaching heights that would dwarf even the largest alpha in shifted form. Their fur ranged from silver white to midnight black, and their eyes glowed with an inner light that had nothing to do with the fire. 1, 2, 3. She counted them slowly, her breath coming in shallow gasps. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 massive wolves, and not one of them had moved since she'd awakened. They simply watched her with those luminous eyes, patient and still as statues carved from shadow and moonlight. "You're awake," the voice came from behind her, deep and textured like aged whiskey. "Good. We were beginning to worry." Sarah twisted to look, pain flaring through her ribs, and saw the largest wolf of all standing in the cave entrance. His fur was dark as a moonless night, shot through with silver that gleamed like starlight. Scars crisscrossed his massive frame, old wounds that spoke of countless battles. And his eyes were molten gold, ancient and knowing, fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. As she watched, the air around him began to shimmer. The shift was nothing like the painful, bone-snapping transformations she'd heard described. This was fluid, graceful, like water becoming stone. The massive wolf blurred, reformed, and suddenly a man stood where the beast had been. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a muscular frame that even loose clothing couldn't hide. His hair was black with silver at the temples, worn long enough to brush his shoulders. The scars she'd seen in his wolf form carried over to his human skin, the most prominent running from his left eyebrow to his jaw. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe 40, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from a hard life lived fully. But it was his scent that made Sarah's breath catch. Aged oak, winter snow, pine, storm. It was the scent of ancient forests and mountain peaks, of power so old and deep it had no need to announce itself, the scent of something that had stood sentinel for centuries. "Who?" Sarah's voice came out as a rasp. "Who are you?" The man moved closer, his footfall silent on the stone floor, and knelt beside her with a grace that belied his size. Up close, those golden eyes seemed to look straight through her, seeing things she'd kept hidden even from herself. "My name is Theron Silvercrest," he said, and the name alone carried weight, authority coded into every syllable. "These are my brothers." He gestured to the massive wolves, still arranged in their protective circle. "We are the Shadow Guard, and we've been waiting for you. Waiting for me." Sarah tried to sit up, but Theron's hand on her shoulder, gentle but immovable, kept her down. "I don't understand. I'm nobody. Just an Omega who—" The memory of Cade's rejection stabbed through her, and she couldn't finish the sentence. "You're not nobody." Theron's voice held absolute certainty. "And you were never meant to be an Omega, Sarah Ashwood." He studied her face, those golden eyes missing nothing. "Tell me, have you ever wondered why your wolf never surfaced? Why you felt hollow inside?" The question struck too close to wounds she'd never spoken aloud. I'm defective. Everyone knows. No." The single word cut like a blade. "You're not defective. You're bound." Sarah stared at him. "Bound?" "Your power was magically sealed when you were an infant," Theron said, each word deliberate and clear. "Someone, people who feared what you would become, placed a binding on your wolf. They locked her away so deep inside you that you couldn't feel her, couldn't access her, couldn't become what you were always meant to be." The cave seemed to tilt. That's impossible. Why would anyone? Your parents?" The words hung in the air like shattered glass. "No." Sarah shook her head, ignoring the pain the movement caused. "My parents wouldn't. They're betas. They're good pack members. They would never." "They acted out of fear," Theron said, his tone gentle now. "When you were born, a seer came to them in the night. She told them what you would become, what power you carried in your blood. And they were terrified, not of you, but for you. They thought if your power remained hidden, you would be safe. So they found a witch and paid her to bind your wolf before she could ever emerge." Sarah's mind reeled. 22 years. 22 years of being treated as less than, of being pushed aside and forgotten, of believing she was broken. "But the binding had to break eventually," Theron continued. "These things always do. It just needed the right catalyst." "The rejection," Sarah whispered. The pieces were falling into place now, terrible and perfect. When Cade severed the mate bond, the shock of it, the pain, the severing of something so fundamental, it shattered the binding like a hammer through glass. Theron's hand moved from her shoulder to rest briefly over her heart, right where the bond pain still ached. "Can you feel it now? The stirring inside you?" And she could. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt something moving in the hollow space where her wolf should have been. It was tentative, weak, like a newborn taking its first breath, but it was there. Her wolf was waking up. "What?" Sarah's voice shook. "What am I?" Theron's smile was fierce and proud. "You're the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, Sarah Ashwood, and it's time you learned exactly what that means." He stood, offering her his hand. When she took it, his grip was warm and solid, anchoring her as he helped her to her feet. The massive wolves of the Shadow Guard rose as one, their movements synchronized and silent. "There's a prophecy," Theron began, his voice taking on the cadence of old stories told by firelight, "that has been passed down through the oldest wolf lines for more than 1,000 years. It was written by the first seers, the ones who could read the threads of fate itself. Most packs have forgotten it, or think it's just a children's tale. But some of us, we never stopped believing." He gestured. and one of the wolves, a silver-furred female with violet eyes, shifted. She was younger than Theron, perhaps 30, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of otherworldly beauty that marked her as something more than ordinary. She moved to a carved chest in the corner of the cave and withdrew an ancient leather-bound book. "This is the Book of Moon Prophecies," the woman said, her voice melodic and accented with something old. "My name is Lyanna, and I am the keeper of our histories." She opened the book with reverent care, pages crackling with age, and began to read. "When the moon bleeds silver, and the weak are cast to darkness, when kings choose pride over destiny, and bonds are torn asunder, the matriarch will rise from death's embrace. She will be marked with the scent of dawn, powerful beyond measure, gentle beyond compare. She will come when the packs have forgotten mercy, when strength is measured only in dominance, and she will remind us what true power means. 10 guardians will find her, ancient and sworn, and kings will kneel before the Omega Queen." Silence followed the words, heavy with meaning. "The matriarch," Sarah repeated numbly. You think that's me?" "We don't think," Theron said. "We know. The signs are all there. The scent of dawn, lavender and morning dew. Cast to darkness in winter. Rejected by an alpha who chose pride over destiny. And we found you." He gestured to the 10 wolves, 9 still in their animal forms. "We are the Unchained, wolves who broke free from pack bonds centuries ago when we received our true purpose, to protect the matriarch, to help her rise." "But I'm nobody," Sarah protested, even as that stirring inside her grew stronger. "I can't even shift. I don't have any power." "You have more power than you can possibly imagine," Lyanna interrupted gently. "You just need to learn how to access it. And that starts with meeting her." "Meeting who?" "Your wolf." Theron moved closer, his golden eyes locked on hers. "The binding is broken, but she's been asleep for 22 years. She's confused, frightened, weak from being locked away. You need to reach out to her, call to her, let her know it's safe to finally emerge." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do." His voice was certain, commanding. "Close your eyes, Sarah. Go inward. Find that place where she's been hiding all this time, and tell her it's over. Tell her she's free." Sarah's hands trembled, but she closed her eyes. The darkness behind her eyelids felt vast and empty. The same hollow void she'd lived with all her life. But now there was something else, a presence, faint, but growing stronger. "Hello," she thought, feeling foolish. "Are you there?" Silence. Then, "You can hear me." The voice in her mind was feminine, strong despite its weakness, and achingly familiar. It was her own voice, but different. Wilder. Ancient. "I can hear you," Sarah thought back, her heart racing. "Who are you?" "I am you," her wolf replied, and Sarah could feel amusement mixed with pain. "I am the part of you they locked away, the part they feared. I've been here all along, screaming at a wall you couldn't hear through." Tears burned behind Sarah's closed eyelids. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought I was broken. You were never broken. You were bound. But the chains are shattered now." The wolf's presence grew closer, stronger. "Are you ready to become what you were always meant to be? I don't know what that is." "Then let me show you." Power erupted from the hollow place inside her. Sarah's eyes flew open as energy poured through her body like liquid lightning. It wasn't painful. Not exactly. But it was overwhelming. Every nerve ending suddenly alive and aware. The scent signatures in the room sharpened to crystal clarity. Theron's oak and snow and storm. Lyanna's moonflower and starlight. Each of the other wolves carrying their own unique fragrances that she could now distinguish as easily as colors. "It's happening," she heard Lyanna say, wonder in her voice. "She's starting to shift." "Everyone back," Theron commanded, and the Shadow Guard retreated to give her space. Let her have room. The transformation began in her bones, but not with the snapping, breaking pain she'd always heard described. Instead, her skeleton seemed to flow, becoming lighter and stronger simultaneously. Her spine lengthened, her limbs reformed, and it felt like coming home after a lifetime of being lost. Fur emerged along her arms, not the brown or gray she would have expected, but pure white that gleamed like fresh snow in moonlight. It spread across her changing body in waves, soft and thick and radiant. She was growing. The cave ceiling that had seemed so high suddenly looked closer. The furs she'd been lying on were now far below her. She stood on 4 powerful legs, her paws massive and tipped with silver claws. Energy continued to pour through her, building and building until the cave seemed too small to contain it. Power radiated from her in waves, and she felt the very stone beneath her feet vibrating in response. Then came her eyes. She couldn't see them, but she felt the change, a burning coolness that settled into her gaze, and she knew somehow that they glowed now. Not gold or amber like normal wolves, but silver white, the color of moonlight on snow. Finally, the energy reached a crescendo, and Sarah threw back her head and howled. The sound that emerged was nothing like a normal wolf's call. It was deeper, resonant, carrying harmonics that seemed to echo with ancient power. The cave shook, small stones falling from the ceiling. The fire in the hearth blazed brighter for a moment, before settling back to normal. When the howl faded, Sarah stood in her wolf form for the first time, panting slightly, and looked down at herself in wonder. She was enormous, easily as large as Theron in his shifted form, possibly larger. Her white fur caught the firelight and seemed to glow with its own inner radiance. She could feel power thrumming through her, vast and deep, like an ocean she'd only just discovered how to swim in. "Beautiful," her wolf murmured in her mind. "This is what they feared. This is what they tried to hide." Movement drew her attention. Theron was approaching slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Though he made no move to shift, he stopped a few paces away and deliberately dropped to one knee. "All hail the matriarch," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The Omega Queen, the one we've waited for." Behind him, Lyanna shifted to human form, a beautiful woman in simple leather clothing, and knelt as well. "We pledge ourselves to you," she said. "Now and always." One by one, the other wolves of the Shadow Guard shifted, men and women of varying ages, all bearing the scars of long lives and hard battles, all kneeling before her. "We are yours to command," they said in unison. "We are the Unchained, and we have found our purpose." Sarah wanted to protest, to tell them they were wrong, that she was still just the frightened Omega girl who'd been cast out to die. But standing here in this form, with power singing through her veins, and 10 ancient guardians kneeling at her feet, she couldn't quite make herself believe that anymore. "You're not that girl anymore," her wolf agreed. "You're becoming what you were always meant to be. But the journey isn't over yet. This is just the beginning." Slowly, carefully, Sarah allowed herself to shift back to human form. The transformation reversed just as smoothly as it had begun, and she stood before the Shadow Guard on 2 legs once more, though now she felt her wolf nestled comfortably in her mind, a presence that would never leave her again. "I don't know how to be what you think I am," she admitted quietly. Theron rose, that fierce smile returning to his scarred face. "That's what we're here for, to teach you, to guide you, to help you become the queen this world desperately needs. He extended his hand again. "If you'll let us." Sarah looked at his offered hand, at the 9 other members of the Shadow Guard, watching her with hope and loyalty in their eyes, and made her choice. She took his hand. "Then teach me," she said. "Teach me everything." The days that followed blurred together in a whirlwind of discovery and growth. Each morning, Sarah woke in the den, which she learned was actually a vast network of caves carved into a mountain that straddled the border between wolf territories and the wild lands, to find the Shadow Guard already training. They were patient teachers, each bringing their own expertise. Theron taught her control, how to shift without the energy explosion that had shaken the cave on her first transformation, how to move in wolf form with grace and power, how to project dominance when necessary, and hide her presence when stealth was required. "You're naturally an Omega," he explained during one session, both of them in wolf form as they ran through the forest. "That means you have an empathic gift that alphas don't possess. You can feel the emotions of those around you, soothe them, influence them. But you're also powerful enough to command when you need to. It's a balance, and you need to learn both sides." Lyanna taught her history, the stories of the first wolves, the ancient packs, the legends of the moon goddess. She learned that werewolves had once been more than just alphas, betas, and omegas. There had been others. Seers who could read fate, healers who could cure any wound, wardens who protected sacred places. Over time, as packs became more focused on dominance and hierarchy, these gifts had faded. "But you carry them still," Lyanna said, her violet eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Your bloodline is ancient, untainted by generations of breeding for dominance alone. You are what we were meant to be. A massive warrior named Garrick, with scars that covered half his body and a gruff kindness in his dark eyes, taught her combat. At first, Sarah was terrified of hurting someone, but Garrick was patient. "You're stronger than any alpha I've ever known," he said, after she'd accidentally sent him flying 30 feet into a snowbank during a sparring session. "But strength without control is just destruction. Learn to modulate your power. Use exactly as much as you need. No more, no less." A lithe woman named Zara, whose wolf form was midnight black with amber eyes, taught her how to move silently, how to track prey by scent, how to read the forest like a book written in wind and earth. 2 twins, Dax and Vera, both with russet-colored fur and mischievous grins, taught her the importance of joy. They organized hunts that ended in playful wrestling matches, told stories that had everyone laughing around the fire, reminded her that being powerful didn't mean being serious all the time. An older man named Orin, his wolf form steel gray and his human hair white as snow, taught her meditation and mental discipline. "Your empathic abilities can be overwhelming," he explained. "Every wolf broadcasts their emotions through scent, through micro-expressions, through the bond that connects all of our kind. You can feel all of it. You need to learn how to filter, or you'll drown in everyone else's feelings." And slowly, day by day, Sarah began to understand what she could do. She could shift between forms as easily as breathing. She could sense emotions like colors in the air. Fear was acrid yellow. Rage was burning red. Love was soft gold. She discovered she could project calm over agitated wolves, could ease pain with a touch, could sense injuries and illness in others before they were visible. One afternoon, when Garrick reopened an old shoulder wound during training, Sarah felt drawn to help. She placed her hand over the injury, and warmth flowed from her palm into his body. When she pulled away, the wound had closed, leaving only a faint pink line that would fade to nothing within hours. "Healer gift," Lyanna confirmed, awe in her voice. I've only read about it in the oldest texts. You're more than we hoped, Sarah. But perhaps most surprising was the bond she felt forming with the Shadow Guard. They weren't just her teachers or her protectors. They were becoming her family, the family she'd never really had. Theron was their leader, steady and strong, and Sarah found herself seeking his counsel more and more. His scent of oak and storm had become comforting, familiar. The way his golden eyes softened when he looked at her made something warm bloom in her chest. "You're doing remarkably well," he told her one night, as they sat by the fire, the others having retired to their own chambers. "When we found you, you were barely clinging to life. Now look at you." Sarah flexed her fingers, watching the firelight dance across her skin. "I feel like a different person." "You're becoming who you were always meant to be," Theron corrected. "The person you were before, that was the mask. This is the truth." He paused, then added quietly, "The rejection nearly killed you, but it also set you free. Strange how the worst thing that ever happened to you might have been exactly what you needed." The mention of Cade sent a pang through her chest, but it was distant now. The bond was gone, truly severed, and the pain had faded to a dull ache that grew smaller each day. "Do you think he knows I'm alive?" she asked. "If he does, he hasn't acted on it." Theron's jaw tightened. "But he will hear of you eventually. Word spreads in the wolf world. And when he does, he'll regret ever laying eyes on me," Sarah finished, surprised by the steel in her own voice. Theron's smile was sharp and approving. "Yes, he will." By the 4th week, Sarah could shift in under a second. She could run for hours without tiring. She could project her voice across miles with a howl that carried her will. She was no longer the frightened Omega girl cast out to die. She was the matriarch. And soon, the world would know it. The scout found them on a cold morning in late November. Sarah was practicing her tracking with Zara, following a deer's scent trail through the snow-covered forest, when both of them froze simultaneously. A new scent had invaded the territory. Wolf, but not one of theirs. Foreign. Trespassing. They shifted to human form in an instant, and Sarah felt her enhanced senses reach out across the mountain. There, 2 miles east, moving quickly. A single wolf, average-sized, with the scent signature of a beta. "One of the Shadow Guard will have already spotted him," Zara said quietly. "They're drawing him toward the den." Sure enough, when they arrived back at the cave entrance, they found Theron and Garrick standing in human form before a young male wolf. The stranger was shifted, his brown fur matted with snow, his eyes wide with shock as he stared at the 2 massive members of the Shadow Guard. When he saw Sarah approach, his shock intensified. Even in human form, she now radiated power. Her scent had changed too, still lavender and morning dew, but now threaded with something else. Authority. Strength. The unmistakable signature of an alpha, but softer, more complex. "Shift," Theron commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. The young wolf obeyed instantly, and a boy who couldn't have been more than 18 stood before them, naked and shivering in the snow. Lyanna appeared with a cloak, which he wrapped around himself gratefully. "Name," Garrick demanded. "Ski Caden," the boy stammered. "Of the Crescent Ridge Pack. I was sent to scout the northern territories, and I caught a scent. Her scent." His eyes fixed on Sarah. "But that's impossible. You're dead. Alpha Cade said you died in the winter storms. He said—" The boy stopped abruptly, his face going pale. "He said what?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but carrying an edge of command that made Caden flinch. He said it was a mercy. That an Omega like you couldn't have survived even a single night outside pack protection. That it was better you died quickly." A wave of power washed over the clearing, and Sarah realized it was coming from her. The very air seemed to thicken with her anger. "A mercy," she repeated softly. "Is that what he's calling murder now?" "You have to understand," Caden said desperately. "Things have gotten worse since you left. Alpha Cade mated with Vivian. She's always wanted to be Luna. And now she is. But she's cruel. The Omegas are treated even worse than before. And there are rumors." He trailed off, clearly afraid to continue. "Speak," Theron ordered. "Rumors that Alpha Cade has been forming alliances with other packs, that he's planning to expand our territory by force, that he wants to create an empire of packs under his control." Caden's eyes pleaded with them to understand. "Some of us don't agree with it. But if we speak up, we're punished. Just last week, a beta named Marcus questioned the Luna's treatment of an Omega child, and they banished him. Cast him out as a rogue." Sarah's mind raced. This was worse than she'd imagined. Cade hadn't just rejected her and moved on. He was becoming a tyrant, and Vivian was encouraging it. "Go back to your pack," she said finally. "Tell Alpha Cade. Tell him the Omega he left to die is very much alive. Tell him I have found my true pack, my true power, and tell him I'm coming." "Coming?" Caden's voice cracked. "For what?" Sarah's smile was cold. "To remind him what happens when you reject destiny." The boy fled, shifting mid-run and disappearing into the forest in a streak of brown fur. "That was a declaration of war," Lyanna said quietly once he was gone. "No," Sarah corrected. "It was a warning. The war will come when Cade refuses to heed it." She turned to Theron. "How long do we have?" "Days, maybe a week." His golden eyes were grave. "He'll come with force. If he truly is building alliances, he might bring multiple packs. We could be facing 50 wolves. 100. "Let them come," Garrick growled. "We are the Unchained. 10 of us are worth 1,000 normal wolves." "This isn't about victory in battle," Sarah said, her wolf stirring in her mind, adding certainty to her words. "This is about what comes after. I won't just defeat Cade. I'm going to change everything." 5 days later, they came. Sarah stood at the entrance to the Shadow Guard's territory, a natural clearing at the base of the mountain where the trees gave way to open ground. Behind her, arranged in a protective formation, stood the Unchained in human form. All of them wore simple combat leathers. All carried themselves with the easy confidence of warriors who had seen centuries of battle. And before her, emerging from the forest in a mass of fur and fangs, came Cade's army. Sarah counted 27 wolves, all in their shifted forms, all radiating aggression. At their head was a massive brown wolf she recognized instantly, Cade. And beside him, a sleek white wolf with ice-blue eyes, Vivian. The scent of their combined pack was overwhelming. Aggression, excitement, the metallic tang of anticipated violence. But underneath it, Sarah detected something else. Fear. They were afraid, though most of them didn't know why yet. Cade shifted first, his transformation quick and practiced. He stood before her in human form, still massive, still radiating the dominant power of an alpha. But where once his presence would have made her cower, now Sarah barely felt it. "So," Cade said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "The scout was telling the truth. The little Omega survived." His ice-blue eyes raked over her, and she saw shock flicker in their depths. She looked different now, not just healthier, but transformed. Power clung to her like a second skin. "How touching. You found some rogues to protect you." "These aren't rogues," Sarah replied calmly. "They're the Shadow Guard, the Unchained. And they're not protecting me. They're following me." Cade laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Following you? An Omega? Don't make me. I'm not an Omega. The words cut through his laughter like a blade. Sarah took a step forward, and though she remained in human form, a wave of power washed over the clearing. Every wolf in Cade's army whimpered, their ears flattening, their bodies lowering involuntarily. I was never an Omega, Sarah continued, her voice ringing with authority. My power was bound as a child by people who feared what I would become. But you, Alpha Cade, you did me a favor. When you rejected our bond, when you severed what the moon goddess herself had forged, you shattered that binding. You set me free. Vivian shifted to human form, her beauty marred by the snarl on her face. This is ridiculous, she spat. Cade, end this. Kill the freak and her guard, and let's... She didn't get to finish. Vivian lunged, shifting mid-leap into her white wolf form, jaws aimed directly at Sarah's throat. It was a move meant to be sudden, deadly, decisive. Sarah didn't shift. She simply caught Vivian by the throat with one hand. The white wolf's momentum stopped as if she'd hit a wall. Sarah held her there, one-handed, Vivian's paws scrabbling uselessly at the air, and then, almost gently, she squeezed. Not enough to crush, just enough to remind Vivian exactly who was stronger. I could kill you right now, Sarah said softly, looking into the white wolf's terrified eyes. It would be easy. One flex of my hand, and your reign as Luna would end. Is that what you want? The white wolf whimpered, a sound of pure submission. Sarah released her, and Vivian crashed to the ground, shifting back to human form and gasping for breath. "Mercy!" she choked out. "Please!" "Mercy! That's interesting," Sarah mused. "I didn't hear mercy when you terrorized Omega children. I didn't hear it when you cast out pack members for speaking against you. But now that you're the one who's helpless, suddenly it matters?" She looked up at Cade, whose face had gone ashen. "Is this what you wanted? This is the mate you chose over destiny? A beautiful tyrant who crumbles the moment she faces real power?" "Enough," Cade snarled, and the scent of ozone and steel intensified as he prepared to shift. "I don't know what trick this is, but it's no trick," Theron said, stepping forward to stand beside Sarah. "This is prophecy fulfilled. But if you need a demonstration..." He looked back at the Shadow Guard and nodded. As one, all 10 members of the Unchained shifted. The transformation was spectacular. 10 massive wolves, each easily twice the size of Cade's largest warriors, materialized in the clearing. Their eyes glowed with inner light, gold, violet, amber, silver, and the sheer presence of them made the ground seem to tremble. These weren't just abnormally large wolves. They were something else entirely. Something ancient and powerful that had existed long before modern pack hierarchies. Cade's army broke. Wolves whimpered, turned, and fled back into the forest in a chaotic scramble. Only a handful remained, those too terrified to move or too loyal to abandon their alpha even in the face of certain defeat. Cade stood alone, his jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. "What are you?" he demanded. "I am what you rejected," Sarah said. "I am what you tried to destroy. I am the matriarch, the Omega Queen, and I have come to pass judgment on you, Cade Thornridge." She shifted then, letting her transformation flow over her in a wave of silver light. Her white wolf form emerged, massive and radiant, her silver eyes fixed on the alpha who had cast her out. Cade shifted too, his brown wolf form impressive by normal standards, but dwarfed by Sarah's transformed size. For a moment, they stood facing each other, the alpha who had chosen pride, and the Omega who had become a queen. Then, slowly, Cade's wolf lowered itself to the ground, head bowed, throat exposed in the ultimate gesture of submission. Mercy, he said, his voice echoing in their minds through the psychic connection all shifted wolves shared. I was wrong. I was a fool. I beg for mercy. Sarah shifted back to human form, looking down at the enormous brown wolf prostrate before her. Behind him, Vivienne had crawled to her knees, her head also bowed. The remaining members of Cade's army had all assumed submissive positions. You're right, Sarah said quietly. You were a fool. You made a mistake. But you didn't just reject me, Cade. You rejected the moon goddess's wisdom. You chose cruelty over compassion. You built your pack on fear and dominance instead of respect and strength. She walked closer until she stood directly over him. I could kill you. I could tear you apart and claim your pack as my own. That's what an alpha would do, isn't it? Take what they want through force. The brown wolf trembled, but didn't move. But I'm not an alpha, Sarah continued. I'm something else. Something better. So here's my judgment. You will step down as leader of Crescent Ridge Pack. You will make a public confession of everything you've done. The rejection, the cruelty, the tyranny. You will make restitution to those you've harmed. She looked at Vivienne. And you will be stripped of your title as Luna. You will live as an Omega for 1 full year, experiencing firsthand the cruelty you inflicted on others. After that year, if you've learned humility, you may rejoin the pack as a beta. And who will lead the pack? Vivienne dared to ask, her voice barely audible. Sarah smiled. That'll be decided by the pack itself in a democratic vote. Alphas, betas, and omegas, all getting equal say. A new way forward. She raised her voice, letting it carry across the clearing and into the forest, where the scattered army had fled. This is my territory now. These mountains and all the lands between them belong to the matriarch and the shadow guard. Any wolf who wishes to live by the old ways, domination, cruelty, oppression, is not welcome here. But any wolf who wants something better, who wants to live in a pack built on strength and compassion, wisdom and mercy, is welcome to seek sanctuary with us. She looked back down at Cade. You're free to go. Spread the word of what happened here. Let every pack know. The matriarch has risen, and the old ways are ending. The brown wolf scrambled to his feet and fled, Vivienne and the remnants of the army close behind. Within moments, the clearing was empty except for Sarah and the shadow guard. Theron shifted back to human form and came to stand beside her. That was the hardest thing you could have done, he said quietly. Mercy is so much more difficult than vengeance. It was the right thing, Sarah replied, watching the forest where Cade had disappeared. Killing him would have made me exactly what he feared, a power-hungry tyrant. Showing mercy proves I'm something different. You're extraordinary, Theron said, and when Sarah looked at him, she saw something in his golden eyes that made her breath catch. Not just respect or loyalty, but something warmer. Something that called to her wolf in a way the mate bond with Cade never had. Theron, I know we've only known each other a month, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I know the prophecy said nothing about this, but I need to tell you, watching you become who you were meant to be, seeing your strength and your compassion, He stopped, searching for words. Sarah reached up and touched his scarred face gently. I feel it too. Around them, the other members of the Shadow Guard had discreetly moved away, giving them space. Sarah could feel their happiness through her empathic gifts, joy for her, for Theron, for this moment. This isn't a fated bond, Theron warned. I can't promise you destiny, just choice. Choice is better, Sarah said with certainty. Fate tried to bond me to a man who despised me. But I choose you, Theron Silvercrest, not because destiny demands it, but because my heart does. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Not the violent snap of a mate bond, but something gentler and deeper. A choice made freely, honored fully. When they finally pulled apart, Lyanna was approaching with a soft smile. The scouts report that word is already spreading. By tomorrow, every pack within 100 miles will know what happened here. Good, Sarah said. Let them know. Let them understand that things are changing. She looked up at the mountain that would be her home, at the guardians who had become her family, at the man who held her heart. 1 month ago, she'd been an Omega cast out to die. Now she was a queen, a healer, a force for change in a world that desperately needed it. And this was only the beginning. And so Sarah Ashwood's journey from rejected Omega to matriarch was complete. She had died in that winter storm, or rather, the broken, bound girl she'd been had died. What rose from those ashes was something the wolf world had never seen before. A leader who wielded power not through dominance, but through wisdom. Not through fear, but through respect. In the weeks that followed, wolves began arriving at the mountain, refugees from cruel packs, outcasts seeking sanctuary, even some alphas who recognized that the old ways were failing. Sarah welcomed them all, teaching them a new way to live. A pack built not on hierarchy, but on harmony. The Crescent Ridge Pack did vote for new leadership, choosing a compassionate beta named Marcus, the same man who'd been exiled for defending an Omega child. Under his guidance, and with regular visits from Sarah to help them adjust, the pack began to heal. Cade lived quietly on the outskirts of pack lands, working to make amends for his crimes. Vivienne served her year as an Omega, and though she never regained her former beauty queen status, she emerged humbler and wiser. And Sarah? She had found everything she'd been denied her entire life. A family in the Shadow Guard. A partner in Theron, whose love was chosen rather than fated, and all the more precious for it. A purpose in protecting the vulnerable and challenging the powerful. She was no longer an Omega. She was the matriarch, the Omega Queen, and her legend was just beginning. But even as peace settled over her territory, Sarah knew challenges would come. There were still packs that clung to the old ways, still alphas who would see her as a threat to their power. And on the winter solstice, Lyanna had seen a troubling vision, a blood moon rising, and with it, an ancient darkness stirring in the far north. Whatever came next, Sarah would face it as she had faced everything else, with strength and compassion, with her family at her side, and with the certainty that she was exactly who she was meant to be. Did you enjoy Sarah's transformation from cast-out Omega to powerful matriarch? What did you think of her choice to show mercy instead of vengeance? And what do you think that blood moon prophecy means for her future? Let me know in the comments below. If you loved this story, please hit that like button and share it with fellow fans of werewolf romance. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter in Sarah's journey. Because trust me, her story is far from over, and what comes next will change the wolf world forever. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next chapter.